My name is Kayla Morgan. I was born and raised in a quiet stretch of rural Ohio, where the winters cut through your skin and the silence inside our house felt colder than any wind outside. I never had the kind of childhood people talk about with nostalgia. When I say I wasn't loved, I don't mean my parents were busy or distant. I mean they didn't want me there. I mean I was an obligation. I could feel it in the way they avoided looking at me at dinner. I could hear it in the sighs when I asked for help with a school project. I didn't act out. I tried to be good. I learned how to read before kindergarten and kept my room clean just to avoid their scolding. But nothing I did ever seemed to matter. My presence was something they tolerated. Like a leaking faucet, they never got around to fixing. On my 17th birthday, I came home to an empty house. The couch was bare. No jacket slung over the back. No television humming. No voices in the kitchen. Just a note on the counter, written in blue pen, folded neatly like it was nothing. You'll figure it out. That's all it said. No goodbye. No explanation. Just that line. Like this was some life lesson I was supposed to learn by being abandoned. I stood there for almost an hour, holding that note, trying to feel anything but numb. But what I felt wasn't pain. It was silence. Like the world had just quietly decided I didn't belong. When I was 12, I found a YouTube video that showed how to bake a vanilla cake from scratch. I didn't have much to work with, but I made a list and saved my lunch money to buy flour, eggs, and food coloring. My mom loved lavender, so I made the frosting light purple, trying to make it look delicate, soft, like something out of a bakery window. It wasn't perfect. The sides were uneven and the lettering was wobbly, but I was proud of it. I'd spent the entire afternoon in that tiny kitchen, dusted in flour, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this would make her smile. When she walked in and saw it, she didn't even pause. She wrinkled her nose and said, "Looks like someone threw up. Get rid of it." Then she walked away. No birthday hug. No thank you. Just that. I told myself she was tired. Maybe work had been stressful. Maybe she didn't mean it. But something inside me dimmed that day, like a light bulb flickering out slowly, without anyone noticing. At 13, I stayed up helping my little brother study for his math test. He struggled with numbers, and I wanted to help. I sat with him for hours, drawing diagrams, going over formulas until my voice went hoarse. When he slammed the book shut and told me to stop acting like I knew everything, it felt like something cracked. He was just a kid. But it wasn't the words. It was the way they mirrored the same sharp edge our parents used. Like kindness, always came back twisted. By 14, I stopped expecting anyone to be different. I didn't stop trying, though. I just lowered the volume of my hopes. I stopped looking for approval and started bracing for disappointment. I didn't cry when they ignored my report card. I didn't flinch when my dad called me a smartass for asking a question. I just nodded and went back to my room, the only space in the world where my voice didn't echo unanswered. I kept baking, though, quietly, at night. Not for them, just for me. I got my first job at a local grocery store when I was 16. It was one of those places with flickering lights and squeaky carts. But I didn't care. He stocked shelves after school, wiped down counters, and bagged groceries with quiet focus. My hands were always a little sore, but I didn't complain. That paycheck meant something to me. It came to exactly $128. I held the envelope like it was gold. I didn't buy anything for myself. I didn't even think about it. I walked straight into the kitchen and handed the money to my dad. I thought he'd be proud. I thought maybe this would be the moment things shifted. Even a little. He didn't even look up from the table. He unfolded a bill, slapped it onto the counter, and said, "You think that's helping? You're just dead weight." Then he pushed the envelope aside like it was junk mail. I stood there frozen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was blank. Like someone had pulled the wires from the inside, and left the shell standing. That night, I ate toast in my room. There was meatloaf on the table. But I didn't want it. I didn't want to feel like I owed them another thankless attempt at love. That moment stayed with me more than I expected. Not because it was the worst thing he ever said, but because it confirmed something I'd been afraid to name. I wasn't there to be loved. I was there to serve a purpose. And when I failed to meet it, I became disposable. After that, I stopped handing over my money. I used it to buy notebooks, granola bars, extra bus tickets. I didn't tell anyone. I just started choosing myself. Quietly. While still living under a roof where love was always conditional. My 17th birthday fell on a Wednesday. I remember that because I had a chemistry quiz that morning and forgot to pack lunch. It was just another day. I wasn't expecting balloons or a cake. But I still hoped maybe there'd be a card. Maybe just a simple happy birthday, muttered under someone's breath. When I walked home from school, the street was unusually quiet. The porch light was off. The car wasn't in the driveway. Inside, the house felt hollow. It smelled like bleach and dust. No TV sounds. No clinking dishes. Just silence. I called out, but no one answered. I walked into the kitchen and found it bare. No plates in the sink. No shoes by the door. My backpack slipped off my shoulder as I noticed something on the counter. A folded piece of paper. One line written in blue ink. "You'll figure it out." I read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. This wasn't a note about dinner or errands. This was it. They were gone. And they weren't coming back. I checked the bedrooms. Closets were empty. Drawers pulled out. Their room was stripped clean, like no one had ever lived there. My brother's posters were gone. The family photo on the shelf had vanished. Even my toothbrush in the shared bathroom was gone. I sat on the floor and stared at the front door, waiting for the knob to turn. But it never did. Hours passed. When it got dark, I flipped on the light switch. But only 2 bulbs worked. I microwaved instant noodles and ate them on the floor because the table felt like a crime scene. The next morning, I knocked on the landlord's door. He told me they had ended the lease early and moved out yesterday. He gave me 7 days to vacate. No explanation. No backup plan. No legal help. I had a suitcase, a backpack, and $42 in my wallet. I tried calling classmates, messaging friends. No one responded. I wasn't popular, but I had people I'd smiled at in the hallway. That didn't seem to matter anymore. No one wanted to be involved with the girl whose family vanished like a ghost story. So I packed what I could and left. I wandered the edges of town, looking for somewhere no one would notice me. I found an old storage unit behind a gas station. The walls were metal and cold. The air smelled like mildew and oil. I laid down a blanket and curled up with my hoodie as a pillow. That's where I slept my first night alone. It wasn't just the floor that was hard. It was the knowing. The knowing that I had no one, no backup plan, no parent wondering if I was okay. Just me. 17. Invisible. And already forgotten. The storage unit was about the size of a walk-in closet. No window. No outlet. Just concrete walls and a metal door that slammed like a prison gate. It didn't have a lock. But I found a rusty chain on the ground nearby and looped it through the handle. It wasn't for safety. It was to feel like I still had a door to close. I used my hoodie as a pillow and a picnic blanket as my mattress. At night, the air turned damp and cold. I wore all the clothes I had, stacked them layer by layer just to keep the shaking down. I pressed my back against the corner where the wind didn't reach. In the mornings, I walked 10 blocks to the YMCA and used their showers before staff arrived. I kept a bar of soap and a washcloth in a resealable bag and moved fast. No one ever asked questions. Maybe they guessed. Maybe they just didn't want to know. After that, I'd go to the public library. It was warm and quiet and had free Wi-Fi. I sat near the back, using the library computers to look for jobs, I filled out applications with no return address. Just an email. I didn't have a phone. I borrowed time. For meals. I kept a jar of peanut butter in my backpack and used the same plastic spoon for breakfast. Lunch. And dinner? It lasted nearly 2 weeks. When it ran low, I rationed it 2 spoonfuls a day. Sipped with water from the drinking fountain at the park. I didn't cry much during that time. Not because I was strong, but because I was numb. There was no room for emotions when your only focus is finding a warm place to sit and not get caught. What scared me most wasn't hunger or cold. It was how quickly I adapted. How fast I accepted that this was my new normal. Wake up. Clean up. Look useful. Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. Don't hope too much. One night it rained hard, and water leaked into the unit from a crack near the roof. I woke up soaked, shivering. I sat there for hours, hugging my knees to my chest, listening to the storm like it was laughing at me. I remember whispering to myself, "You don't get to break. Not yet. Not here." That was the first time I realized I had no one. But it was also the first time I truly knew I was still here. Still standing. That counted for something. I found the job by accident. A faded sign taped to the diner's window said, "Help needed, night shift." I walked in, teeth still chattering from the rain the night before. The woman behind the counter looked up, narrowed her eyes, and said, "You ever wash dishes?" I nodded. She handed me an apron that smelled like onions and pointed to the back. I didn't ask questions. I just started scrubbing. My hands turned red from the hot water. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. This was the first time in weeks I felt like someone saw me. Her name was Rhonda. Air like fire. Voice like gravel. She didn't smile much. Didn't talk unless necessary. She ran that place like a drill sergeant and didn't suffer fools. I respected that. It made her easy to read. That first night, around 2 in the morning, I nearly passed out at the sink. I hadn't eaten all day. My legs were shaky. My head floated like it wasn't mine. Rhonda walked by, paused, and set a wrapped sandwich beside the sink. "Eat," she said. "You're no good to me passed out." I stared at the sandwich like it was a trap. But my body didn't wait. I devoured it in minutes, barely tasting the ham and cheese. She didn't ask me where I lived. Didn't press for details. But after we closed, she tossed me a set of keys without looking. "Back shed's empty. You can crash there if you need. Don't make a mess." She turned away before I could speak. That was it. No speech. No pity. Just one woman giving another a chance to not freeze to death. The shed had no insulation. Just an old cot. A space heater. And boxes of expired ketchup packets. But it was dry. It was safe. It was mine. Every night. I scrubbed dishes like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Every coin I saved went into a tin I kept under the bread rack. I washed my clothes in the sink. Dried them behind the stove. I was invisible. But I was surviving. Rhonda never said much. But sometimes, when she passed by, she gave a small nod. And somehow, that was enough to keep me going. The first thing I bought with my tips wasn't clothes or a better blanket. It was a prepaid phone with barely 2 gigs of data. I used it mostly at the library, where I could connect to Wi-Fi. But at night, I sat in the back of the diner and played YouTube videos under the glow of the heat lamp near the dish pit. I watched channels about budgeting, freelancing, job interviews. I learned what a resume should look like, how to answer questions I'd never been asked, how to build a profile on job boards. I wrote everything down in a spiral notebook I found in the lost and found bin. The phone's battery died fast. I kept it plugged into the wall behind the toaster when Rhonda wasn't looking. I didn't text anyone. I didn't have anyone to text. That little rectangle wasn't for connection. It was for survival. I started applying for jobs I didn't think I qualified for. office temp work, filing, data entry, anything that didn't require a uniform. I printed one resume and walked block to block, leaving copies anywhere with a now hiring sign. Most days, no one called. But I kept walking, kept showing up. Peanut butter still carried me through the nights. The same jar, the same spoon. It became more than food. It was rhythm. It was control. When everything else felt out of reach, I could control that one thing, how I stayed alive. One afternoon, I got an email from a small private office. They needed someone to digitize old documents. No interview, just instructions and a start date. I showed up the next day in my cleanest jeans and borrowed boots. The office smelled like copier toner and lavender hand soap. The woman at the front desk, Angela, didn't ask about my background. She just pointed to a stack of folders and said, "You'll need a login. Let me get you set up." That was the moment things started to shift. At first, I didn't even know how to use Excel. I Googled every formula, every shortcut. I stayed late after hours, watching videos and copying tutorials until my eyes burned. If I didn't understand something, I figured it out by sunrise. Angela noticed. By the third week, she pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to assist with her team's data reports. I said yes before I even knew what that meant. I went home to the diner shed and cried into my sleeves that night. Not because I was scared, because someone had seen value in me. The work came fast after that. I picked up freelance gigs, basic spreadsheets, survey analysis, formatting decks for presentations. I worked on weekends, nights. Anytime I wasn't at the office, I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. I sent my first real invoice for a client project, $500. I was sure they'd send it back. Say it was too high. Or worse, ghost me. But 3 days later, the money showed up in my PayPal account. No negotiation. New questions. I stared at the screen until it blurred. That money meant more than food or heat or even rest. It meant I had finally turned skill into survival. I wasn't just reacting to life anymore. I was starting to build one. 2 months later, I moved into a studio in a rundown apartment building on the south side of town. The carpet was ugly and the heater wheezed like an old man. But it had a window and a lock. It had a door with my name on the mailbox. I slept on the floor with my backpack as a pillow and smiled at the ceiling. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't staying somewhere until I got kicked out. I was home. My name was on the lease. And that meant everything. I never planned to tell anyone what happened. I thought if I kept moving forward, the past would stay where it belonged behind me. But one night, after a friend begged me to share my story on her podcast about resilience, I finally said yes. We recorded in her garage. Nothing fancy. Just 2 chairs, a mic, and a cold breeze from under the door. I told the story plainly, how I'd been left, how I survived, how I found small kindness in strange places, and how I built something of my own. I didn't think anyone would listen, but 4 days after it aired, the episode hit 1 million plays. My inbox exploded. Messages from strangers poured in. Some said my story gave them strength. Others shared their own versions of being cast out, forgotten by the people who should have stayed. I cried reading them. Not from sadness, but from relief. I wasn't alone. And then came their names. First, an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line: Kayla, you're still my daughter. I opened it slowly. Hands cold. It was from my mother. No apology. No mention of what happened. Just one small paragraph. I listened to your podcast. Maybe we should talk. There might still be time to mend things. There it was. No warmth. No regret. Just calculation. Like she had heard the plays, read the comments, and realized I'd become someone worth reclaiming. I sat still for a long time. closed my laptop, walked around my tiny apartment in circles, trying to decide if I was angry or just stunned. The answer was both. Less than an hour later, another email came. This one was from Tyler, my brother. "Are you really doing okay now? I just listened to the podcast. I miss you. Maybe we could meet up sometime." No explanation. No questions about how I survived. No mention of that note left on the counter. Just a vague hand reaching out through years of silence. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. But something about Tyler's message wouldn't leave me. He had been 16 when they left. Old enough to understand, but maybe still young enough to be afraid. The next morning, at therapy, I told Dr. Harlow everything. She sat quiet for a while, then said gently, "You don't have to respond. But if you need closure, you could choose to speak to the one who hurt you the least." And so I did. We agreed to meet at a small cafe tucked into a side street near downtown. I got there early and chose a table in the far corner, where no one could overhear. My hands shook as I wrapped them around the coffee cup, watching the door. When Tyler walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was shorter. His eyes looked tired. He wore a faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers. He spotted me, hesitated, then made his way over, holding his cup like a shield. He said my name quietly. I nodded. He sat down across from me and took a deep breath. I don't know where to start. I didn't help him. I waited. "Back then, I thought you chose to stay behind," he said. "Mom told me you had plans. That you wanted to live with someone else?" He blinked. 16 isn't a baby. You could have called, emailed, anything. He dropped his gaze. I know. I didn't want to believe they'd lie. But I didn't ask questions either. I was scared. And I was a coward. I believed him. Not because I forgave him, but because fear is familiar. I'd lived with it too. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photo. The two of us, standing by a birthday cake. I remembered that cake. I had made it myself. Lavender frosting. My 13th birthday. The last year I thought I could make her smile. "I kept this," he said, his voice cracking. I always wondered if I had said something that day. Would things have been different? I looked at the girl in the photo and didn't recognize her anymore. That version of me had disappeared the moment I saw that folded note on the counter. I took a sip of my coffee and asked, "So why now?" He looked caught. "I heard the podcast. You sounded okay. Like maybe you'd be willing to forgive." He didn't say the rest. But I knew it. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because now I had something they wanted. And Tyler, he just wanted to be let off the hook. The call came 2 days after I met Tyler. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe unfinished anger, made me press accept. Her voice came through like a ghost from another life. Raspy. Thin. Too familiar. "It's Mom," she said. I didn't say anything. I waited. I listened to the podcast again. I just wanted to talk. Not to justify anything. Just to explain. I still didn't speak. I didn't trust her voice. I didn't trust her pauses. "Back then, things were hard," she said. "Your dad lost his job. We were drowning in debt. We couldn't afford to raise all three of you." She paused, like she expected sympathy. "You were always strong. Kayla, I thought you'd figure it out. Maybe end up in foster care or something more stable. Maybe even better off than at home." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. "You don't know anything." And I hung up before she could hear my voice shake. Later that night, an email arrived from my father. The subject line just said, "Time to talk." "Kayla, I know you're still angry. But what's in the past should stay in the past. Your mom is sick now. Tyler's having a baby. We don't have much time left. We should help each other like a real family. I heard you're doing well now. So it probably wouldn't be hard for you to cover a few debts. Consider it your duty as a daughter. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just veiled demands dressed up like reconciliation. I didn't hesitate this time. I wrote one line. I don't owe you anything. Then I blocked the number, filtered their emails into spam, deleted the call history. I expected silence after that, but Tyler showed up the same afternoon. You're really going to turn your back on them, he asked. Standing in the hallway of my building. I didn't answer right away. I looked him in the eyes and smiled. Not bitter. Just done. If Grandma hadn't left me anything. Would you be here? He didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence gave me everything I needed to know. Daniel, the attorney my grandmother had trusted, called me in for a private meeting. He said there was something I needed to see. Something Grandma June had left behind. Waiting for the right moment. When I arrived at the small conference room, he handed me a thick envelope with my name, written in handwriting I knew by heart. Curvy. Careful. Gentle. The same script that used to write notes in my lunchbox when I was little. Even my real name. Used only by her. Inside was a letter. Dated years ago. The first line stopped me cold. If you're reading this, everything has unfolded exactly as I expected. I sank into the chair and kept reading. When you were 8, your parents attempted to transfer all of my assets into their names while I was away on a business trip. They used forged documents. They thought I was too old. Too soft to notice. They were wrong. I found out early. And instead of suing them, I gave them 2 choices. Leave Charleston and never return. Or I'd go public with everything. They chose money. And to protect their name, they chose to leave you behind. 2. No hesitation. No apology. I paused. My throat tightened. My grip crushed the edge of the page. So, I wasn't abandoned out of struggle. I was left behind because I was inconvenient. Because I was worth less than a failed con job. I kept reading. Her words were clear. Sharp. But still wrapped in love. I didn't tell you sooner because I wanted you to grow up with some part of your heart unbroken. You deserved a childhood free from betrayal. I protected you the only way I could. I folded the letter and held it in my lap. This wasn't just abandonment. It was betrayal. Cold. Strategic. And my grandmother had shielded me from the truth for as long as she could. Now I knew. And I was ready for whatever came next. I unfolded the second page with both hands. The paper was softer than I remembered. And her words felt like they had waited years to breathe. I didn't shield you because I thought you were weak. I shielded you because you were strong. Because I knew one day, you'd face them, and you'd do it with a clear heart. Not one already poisoned by what they did. You were not abandoned because you were difficult. You were left because you were a threat to their greed. They didn't fail to love you. They failed to see your worth. And that's not your burden to carry. I paused. Let those words settle. The ache in my chest loosened. Like a knot, I didn't realize I'd been holding my whole life. She continued. You are a Richardson. And we women with this name don't topple easily. I didn't leave you this estate for revenge. I left it so you could build something bigger than what they ever imagined. They will come back. They already have. With sweet words. With fake tears. With lies. But remember this: a decade without them didn't break you. It shaped you. Use the key. Not just for the safe, but for any door you want to open. Freedom. Kindness. Power. I chose you. Kayla. Every single day. Love doesn't come from blood. It comes from who stays when everyone else walks away. I folded the letter slowly, pressing it closed like it was something sacred. There was no anger in me anymore. No lingering ache for closure. There was only truth. And it was mine to carry now. I didn't need their names in my phone. I didn't need their apologies. I had already been chosen. The lobby of the Richardson Foundation gleamed with marble floors and brass fixtures. I'd walked through it 100 times, each step more confident than the last. But today, the air was different. The receptionist looked up with wide eyes. "They're here," she said. "No appointment." Refusing to leave. I didn't ask who. I already knew. I walked down the stairs slowly, heels clicking sharp across the floor. And there they were, Robert and Diana Morgan. My biological parents, standing under the logo of the foundation they once tried to steal. They wore tailored suits, spoke in low tones, but their eyes burned with the same entitlement I remembered from that kitchen counter at 17. I approached. "Calm. Steady. We need to talk," my mother said. "Privately." I kept my expression still. "Every legal matter from you has been addressed through counsel. If you continue to disrupt operations, I'll have security escort you out." My father stepped in. Voice clipped. "She has no right to run a foundation of this size. This is a family estate. And we are the only legal relatives left." I gave a small nod to the front desk. "Reserve conference room 4. Now." 10 minutes later, we sat across a long glass table. I was at the head. They were on the other side. No warmth. No blood ties. Just a final reckoning. I began without emotion. "You left me when I was 17. No call. No letter. And now you return. Not for me, but because she left more than you could ignore." My mother flushed. "We said it was a mistake." I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a scanned copy of Grandma June's handwritten letter, the one outlining their attempted theft, and their choice to leave me behind. "If I need to present this to the full board, I will." My father looked at the document like it was fire. My voice stayed calm. "Don't tell me I'll regret this. I've lived 10 years without either of you, and not once have I felt regret." My mother's eyes narrowed. "And what will the public believe? If they hear your version, that you abandoned your daughter for $42 million, I stood slowly, adjusting my blazer. "Then tell the whole story. Tell them you left your child with nothing but a note. That you tried to steal from her grandmother. That you vanished for over a decade, and only came back when you saw my name on a title deed." Silence settled over the room like a curtain. My father gathered his briefcase. My mother followed, her jaw tight. They didn't say another word. This time, they didn't look back. And this time I didn't want them to. I stayed in that chair long after the door closed. The late-day sunlight hit the edge of the table. On the wall was a photo of Grandma June, smiling beside the foundation's first scholarship recipient. I gave a quiet nod. Not to them. To her. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. A few days after the final confrontation, Daniel called me again. Just one sentence. "It's time to watch the final video." We met in Grandma June's office on the top floor. Everything had been kept just the way she left it. Her desk was polished. The calendar still frozen on the month she passed. And her blue cardigan draped neatly over the back of her chair. Daniel plugged in a small USB and stepped back, giving me the room. The screen flickered to life. And then there she was. Grandma June. Same calm voice. Same wise eyes. She looked straight into the camera, as if she'd always known I would be on the other side of that screen. "If you're watching this, Kayla, then everything has unfolded just as I feared, and just as I prepared for." She paused. Breathed. Continued. "I didn't just leave you money. Numbers can't protect you. What I left you was a mission." The screen shifted. A montage began. Children in torn jackets outside a rural school. A teenage girl reading in a quiet library. A mobile clinic parked beside a trailer park. A food pantry in a forgotten town. All of them bore the same small label, Bright Roots Initiative. A private branch of the Richardson Foundation. I created Bright Roots quietly. For children abandoned by the very people meant to protect them. For kids in foster care. For those no one believes in. I was once one of them, I was a child. No one chose. Until someone gave me a chance. I want you to be that someone now. The camera cut back to her face. Not because you're wealthy, but because you know what it feels like to be discarded, overlooked, underestimated. You know what it means to fight for dignity. I sat there frozen. Not with fear, but with understanding. This wasn't just about reclaiming a legacy. This was about extending it. She closed the message with a smile so soft it cracked something open in me. You're not just the heir. You're the continuation. The screen went black. But something inside me finally turned on. 2 months later, I stood in front of the Richardson Foundation board. I wore Grandma's wool blazer, the one she wore during her first board meeting. My hair pulled back the way she used to help me fix it when I was little. They didn't look at me like a girl anymore. They looked at me like a leader. I presented a 3-year expansion plan for Bright Roots, STEM scholarships for girls in rural districts, housing stipends for college-bound foster youth, mobile internet hubs in underserved counties, no emotion. No begging. Just clarity and numbers. Structure and purpose. When I finished, the room was silent. Then heads began to nod. That's when I knew. I had stepped into the space she built, not as a shadow, but as an extension. I didn't change her office. I still sat at her desk. The lavender she loved remained in the window. Even the old clock kept ticking in that steady rhythm. Like her voice telling me, keep going. I still drove her 2008 Toyota Corolla. Not because I couldn't afford another car, but because it reminded me of the journey, of who I was, and how far I'd come. And every time I got out of that car and clipped on my badge that read Executive Director, I didn't think about money. I thought about the children who weren't chosen. The boys who never heard the question, what do you want to be? The girls who still sat on cold floors wondering if love would ever knock on their door. I didn't use wealth to prove my worth. I used it to create value. If she were standing in that hallway, watching me through the glass, I think she'd smile. That soft, proud smile that meant everything and nothing at once. You did it. Kayla, not just survived. You made it matter.